when they come across a situation that is of high conflict or dealing with these types of issues, that they know they have something they can turn to for a response. And the only way that can happen is through these strategic partnerships, through grant making organizations supporting us in our mission to make sure that we can keep this free for as many people across the world as possible. And also to ensure that we're actually giving this power to the advocates, as Sandy mentioned, so they can do what they do best, right? They protect these individuals on a day in, day out basis. And if we're able to equip them with these tools, we're now amplifying their work X amount, right? Probably 100 times more than they were able to before, because now they can speak in any language they want. They can provide the support to the individuals that they want. They can create these safety plans that are not just physical, but also digital. I think the power of what Ruth has
Yeah.
to offer, we want to be able to get into as many hands as possible. And the only way to do that is to continue to talk about it, to continue to partner with
Yeah.
organizations, and to continue to do the best work we can possibly do, which is just focus on the tech that protects.
A phone can become a weapon. Apps that are meant to track lost devices become a tool for stalking. AI tools help create fake videos that can be used for blackmail. Abusers are weaponizing technology in ways that most of us can't imagine or keep up. So when most AI startups chose the path of unicorn valuations, Parasol Cooperative founder Meg Shaw chose a different path. With an app that faces digital threats, whether you're a teen getting bullied or an elderly person getting scammed. Non-profit, mission-driven, where the stakeholders are people facing abuse or helping people who are under that threat. They're building something rarer than a billion-dollar company. They're building AI that you can trust. Founders' stories usually begin with an inspiration or two people putting an idea together, but sometimes it comes from the one thing that AI doesn't have that human beings have: real experience, multimodal. And by that I mean stepping in and using your experience to inspire a startup. So this is where great startups happen, when somebody not only could be the customer, but really is and has a passion for making sure that that service, what they're providing, is the best because they're one of the customers. Or it could have just been a mother trying to protect her son from the threats of gaming in this digital tech abuse driven world.
I mean, it's kind of how this all started, right? Like I was trying to keep up with my son playing video games, and I could not figure out what he was doing on there, and I was worried about the whole sextortion thing, so I went on to OpenAI and I asked a question about how do you talk about sextortion with your teenager, and it basically said, "Sorry, it's out of policy." And the technologist in me didn't accept that answer, and I was like, "Oh hell no, this is not this can't be." And I went on to, at the time, I think Party Rock, which was one of the AWS's products that was out there. I started playing around with it, and it's since been rebranded to something else. But we found another alternative to try, and surprisingly, it was giving me back some really robust responses when when I prompted it the right way. And so I sent it over to Sandy, and I have this thing every time I get on a call, and I say that, so I did a thing, and everybody on the call at work just goes, "Oh no, here we go." And this is how Ruth was introduced to the team. So I was like, I did a thing. Can you guys maybe try it out and see what you think? And so we got it out to a whole lot of our research colleagues that we were working with already. We got it out to individuals that are in the field doing the work, to survivors that have actually been working with the organization, kind of as research participants, and found that we can make this really robust tool, right? And I think in one of your old podcasts as well, you had mentioned it's sort of like this tailored LLM that you can have that's specific to the task at hand, right? And I think in this instance, Ruth really, really shined. as we started to ask more and more questions, we were trying to figure out how do we engage with it differently. And the use cases just, we didn't even envision some of these use cases, and they started happening, and it was beautifully handled as part of the chat. So, an accidental project, which was just sort of like a, hey, what do you think? To now being in about 29 countries is blowing our minds. Yeah, as of yesterday, right? So, I'm kind of flabbergasted in many ways that there are so many people out there doing harm. But I'm also one to be that sort of, people talk about half glass full, glass half empty, and I'm the glass doesn't exist kind of person. So, um, you just do what you can, and you counteract it with the best way you can, and this is it, right? Knowledge is power that no one can take away from you, and if we're able to equip you with that, and that's what Ruth really does, then we've done our job, right? Because we've trained you to be more vigilant about yourself and your family online. So,
It's so funny how just the experience leads Megs to founding Parasol Cooperative and eventually for the idea of Ruth to emerge. See, some AI startups, they're chasing unicorns, billion-dollar exits. That's a business and it's totally good. Others are B Corps, trying to make a benefit, public benefit. All good. But how many have not only the courage to do a nonprofit, but to become a trusted guardian for digital safety? Now, this choice isn't easy. When you become a nonprofit, you're automatically giving up the big payday in a way there really shouldn't be an exit. Salaries are going to be a little bit lower. And trying to get people to work for you, they're going to have to really share that mission, that passion, which is why, as a startup, you want to build teams that have that. And even under such a challenge in choosing the nonprofit path, which is way more challenging than going the usual investor route, in the end, it's still a long plod and you have to be able to get through it. But the mission of a nonprofit is so closely aligned with its users. And it's precisely this structure that makes Ruth such a great fit for its mission. There's such a spectrum of problems that Ruth helps solve, and it's so challenging. And if I'm like creating money for a profit company,
yeah.
it would be hard. It would be a different role to raise software and funding. I guess what I'm trying to get to is that the obstacles you're getting to actually do this as a 501c3, which so aligns with its mission, but the not only the cost, but just the adaptations you're going to have to make from not doing it like the traditional VC way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think that's one of the challenges we always kind of encountered since we formed the organization, which is, we purposely took the step to not be a for-profit. One, because, from a VC standpoint, when I consulted with many of the VC friends that I had worked with in the past, their comment was, "This isn't a big enough market." And to me, to call something like this a market just makes me cringe, right? Um,
Right.
but at the same time, from a for-profit standpoint, that's what VCs look for, right? Is the profitability and what they can get out of it. And also from a VC angle, having been in startups and advised startups, a lot of times you lose control of the mission at hand, right? When you have VCs involved, because obviously their point of view, depending on how much money they've given you, may outweigh some of the stuff that the organization leaders might be doing. So one of the reasons we kind of didn't go down the for-profit route was that. But the most important reason we went down 501c3 is I wanted to actually show people that tech can be affordable. Tech can be something that's accessible and solve real world problems in a way that is not going to break the bank. And I think with the team we have and the work that we've been doing, the research and the time that we spent doing that research was critical because that allowed us to better understand how we were going to proceed with this. So the 501c3 really does help us to stay true to why we started the organization and continue to build out those types of tools and technologies that can really help individuals. So it was really more of a labor of love, so to speak, that it started out as, and it's a
Yeah, yeah.
passion of mine to be using tech in any way I can. And so to combine the two of protecting people and technology, it just made complete sense.
What sparked the idea of Ruth? Where was the first conversation, the growing through this that led you to where I could meet you at TechCrunch just a few month ago?
So the organization that we started is actually the Parasol Cooperative. And I'm one of the original founders of the Parasol Cooperative. I've been in the tech industry for over 20 plus years, and largely focused on data analytics and digital apps and things. So been in this space for quite some time, both in large enterprises as well as small ones. And so my history with the organization is really where my personal experiences from my childhood, as well as my professional experiences through education and work, really kind of collided when the lockdowns occurred. I think one of the first things that came to mind was, how are these people going to keep themselves safe at home? What are we going to do as far as giving them the right tools necessary? And overnight, a lot of these organizations that were used to sort of that in person dialogue were now forced almost to go to technologies, right? And so the organization started out as a 501(c)(3) with a mission to protect lives through technology. And what we do is we build technology to protect, and that's not just products, but also services and knowledge articles and other things from a thought leadership standpoint that can really serve the community to be, able to get the help that they need. Because nowadays with tech, there's so much happening. And I think it's important to make sure that we highlight that.
I'm Sandy. I've actually have about 15 years of experience building programs, victim services programs for victims and survivors of human trafficking. And so when I came onto Parasol Cooperative just in March this year, it was just a fantastic opportunity to merge my interest in technology and everything that I've seen in the world of human trafficking over 15 years, and how technology and emerging technology was really used to exploit people and also used to assist people as well. And just kind of watching that evolution got me really interested in working in the tech space. So I absolutely love what Parasol Cooperative is doing, because we are actually building really human-centered products. Our apps that we're Ruth that we're going to talk about, it's built from the perspective of people who would use it, for the people who would use it. And so I think it's just amazing. So
Yeah. We like to say everything we do is survivor centered. So we always focus on how it's going to affect them, and that's kind of why Ruth became such a big sort of hit. We got to TechCrunch as a result of introducing Ruth to the team at TechCrunch, who then graciously actually donated the sponsorship to us as an organization. And it was just such a wonderful experience being there and seeing all this amazing innovation, but also talking about safety, right? Because it's important as part of the work we do within the AI space that we really do need to take those things into consideration going forward.
See, sometimes the perfect solution reveals itself through the constraints. Maybe you don't have a lot of money. Maybe you can't afford to compete against the ChatGPTs of the world. Then build it with heart, passion, a mission. And remember that AI is making tech cheaper and cheaper for the most of us. So while it's cool to follow all those stories of OpenAI and who's going to be the trillion-dollar AI company, let's bring it down here to practical terms. For Ruth to be able to spread its wings, the biggest barrier among most AI is, what do we do with that private data? We're arguing it over, we're suing each other, but in the end, as a startup, you think, how can I align my incentives? And what Ruth has done in stage one, we're hoping this will continue, is make this where you can just go in and not share any information at all. Because if you're a person under threat, that tech abuse that they teach about could come back if your identity is attached to what's going on. And think about it if you're an advocate, like a social worker, a person who works in an organization helping people under domestic abuse, human trafficking. What if their data was revealed? And they're a large part of the early growth of Ruth. See, Those under threat survivors, they need to be able to check out the stalkerware and be able to feel that they're not going to be exposed by taking that action. And unlike commercial security apps that collect user data, RUTH operates with zero knowledge architecture, meaning even Parasol Cooperative can't access that user information. And I went to TechCrunch Disrupt 2024, we were pitching there, and nobody I ever met would even dare think about not taking data. And the biggest block to getting into enterprise is that personal data, that privacy. And to get to work with governments, privacy is key. So let's listen to why that choice was made and hopefully why that will continue. And the thing that got me excited when I first met at your booth was that you're not actually tracking the user. Yay. Like, oh my God, right? No, but it's so, we're like, what are you going to do with that data? Well, we're just,
Yes.
fair use. It's that weird, I mean, you're using RAG, LangChain, AWS Cloud, just a really smart setup, but you don't, what they being the greater they,
Yeah.
don't fine tune like they do. You don't update all the time. And last question is, where do you get some of the sources of information? Because this is such a volatile, space, to be able to get accurate information and be able to feed that LLM, which actually keeps it safer, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, when we first started doing this, we knew we didn't want to fine tune because fine tuning requires a whole slew of updates, constant updates to be made for it to be more relevant and so that it doesn't hallucinate. You know, but even then it hallucinates quite a lot because you don't know every possible scenario. And so having a RAG lane chain model kind of gives you that flexibility to not only update the information that it's referencing before it sends it to the LLM to kind of come back with the appropriate response, but it gives us the ability to update the research, right? So, and I'll talk a little more about that research, but Sandy's probably a good person to respond to that side of it. Um, the research part of it is critical because every day technology is changing and evolving. Every day there's new ways people are finding to abuse. There's how do you train it to be trauma informed? How do you give it the right information in terms of the intersection of tech and abuse, right? Because that could be an evolving target. So to fine tune it would require quite a lot of resources, but also it wouldn't always be accurate, right? Because sometimes it just retains it in memory and it doesn't really update accordingly. So we decided to go down the ragling chain route for that reason to give us that flexibility. But also, it's just a better model for right now until the reasoning models come out, which is when we'll likely start to use some of those as well. But a large portion of what Ruth responds with is a research backed set of data, right? And Sandy, if you want to hit on that a little bit in terms of, just what research is out there and how we're leveraging some of that.
I mean, I think that what's important is that we use vetted data. Um, part of the what happens in the LLM models that people complain about, right, is the garbage in, garbage out. If you're just constantly recycling conspiracy and all kinds of things, who knows what's going to come out. So we just want to make sure that it's trained using, scholarly research, especially on being trauma informed. Information that's publicly available information from national reputable organizations doing victim services work, things like that. And so far, um, we've just been getting quite a high degree of accuracy, especially even with resources that Ruth will give you resources for getting help in, Kandahar, Afghanistan, Algiers. We've tested it all over the world in kind of very remote places, and it seems to be giving like accurate resources and information. So
Yeah. And some of that is actually in the LLM itself, right? So some of that trained data that's available is from the LLM. There are certain resources obviously that we have as well that we've kind of injected into the data set for context purposes, right? But I think at the end of the day, when we started to figure out what it is from a survivor perspective you really need is who do I call? I'm in this situation, what do I do? And kind of better understand their circumstances, right? And so Ruth was really trained to be that sort of guardian almost, to provide that. And to kind of circle back on your point about collecting data, like I've been in data for God knows how long, right? And I've been on the side of let's collect every possible piece of information we can about a person so we know exactly where they are, when they are, and how often they go there and all of that, right? And I think I've come to the realization now, sort of being on that survivor side of the mindset here, is that that could re-victimize people, right? And the goal for us is really to ensure we're not doing that, that we're not participating in that. And when you go to our site to use Ruth, we do not collect any emails. We do not collect your name. We even tell you, don't give us all this information. We don't need it. And when you exit the chat, the data goes away. We don't use that data to train. We don't use that data to analyze right now. We may in the future want to use it for quality assurance just to make sure that the model is responding the way we need it to. But there's different ways to capture that as well. So, AI isn't perfect. Ruth isn't perfect. And so we also provide a feedback form for individuals so that they can submit, information to us saying, hey, I asked for this. This just didn't seem correct. And you please fix it. And we do our best to try to prioritize those. In some cases, we can do it quickly. Some cases, it takes a little while. So it just kind of varies, I think.
And I think that privacy piece is, by far one of the most important pieces, because then you're able to actually give the context of what's happening without
Mhm.
fear of that information being in somebody else's hand or being used for other purposes, you know?
Yeah. And it's always the saying, right? In the tech world, if it's a free product, you're the product. In our case, it's a free product. It's just a free product.
Like,
You are not the product.
we're a nonprofit. That's the benefit of being a nonprofit, right? So
Yes.
In a world where tech companies' profit motives conflict with user safety many times, RUTH's nonprofit structure isn't just an organizational choice, it's a safety feature. By removing the pressure to monetize user data or optimize engagement, sort of make it fake, get more and more. Remember, that's where all our business models come from, the ad model. Why apply it to AI? Parasol Cooperative has designed an app that can be wholly dedicated to its sole purpose, providing reliable, trauma-informed guidance to anyone facing digital abuse, and to do it in a place of safety, as they say, hashtag tech to protect. It's a perfect fit for an imperfect world, and that's what AI startups can be doing, besides creating a smart intelligence that may destroy us and take our jobs. What if it was the way technology gets really easy for most of us to use and can get into these projects, these parts of society that really need the help, the privacy, and the respect? Ruth delivers that day in and day out. I can't wait to see them grow in 2025. Where would you like to see it going even further as it grows and sort of evolves and you learn from your users how to do the right thing?
yeah. So I mean, I'm really excited about the possibilities to do institutional partnerships, have Ruth embedded into the work of some larger organizations and institutions that are working with vulnerable people in the world on a global scale. And I think that that's a really exciting for me. So those are some of the partnerships we're working on right now.
We'd really like to be able to proliferate this as far and deep into the world as possible, right? And the reason is because this problem is not specific to any gender, to any race, to any country. It's affecting every single one of us that has any kind of device that we carry, or that is in a relationship that is of conflict, or that is in a situation that's easily conditioned to be able to put into a human trafficking situation. And the unfortunate part of this is, this problem is so big that something like Ruth could really, really be powerful for those individuals that are facing this day to day, or that are in these situations and unsure of how to proceed going forward, where to look for help, right? And so educating people on best ways to deal with these issues, to deal with how to protect their data, how to clean their data up, These are all things that require effort from individuals, but we don't take that effort until it actually affects us, right? And so when it does affect you and your brain is in that fight or flight mode, how are you going to deal with it? That's where Ruth comes in. And I really hope that people are at least aware that Ruth exists so that when they, not if, but when they come across a situation that is of high conflict or dealing with these types of issues, that they know they have something they can turn to for a response. And the only way that can happen is through these strategic partnerships, through granting making organizations supporting us in our mission to make sure that we can keep this free for as many people across the world as possible. And also to ensure that we're actually giving this power to the advocates, as Sandy mentioned, so they can do what they do best, right? They protect these individuals on a day in, day out basis. And if we're able to equip them with these tools, we're now amplifying their work X amount, right? Probably 100 times more than they were able to before, because now they can speak in any language they want. They can provide the support to the individuals that they want. They can create these safety plans that are not just physical, but also digital. They're able to translate on all kinds of languages, including Klingon, which is probably the language we need to be talking about here. But,
Thank God. No.
listen, I'm just saying, in case Spock comes down and needs some help. But I think the power of what Ruth has to offer, we want to be able to get into as many hands as possible. And the only way to do that is to continue to talk about it, to continue to partner with organizations, and to continue to do the best work we can possibly do, which is just focus on the tech that protects.